Girls, today we are starting to learn about ecosystems. And so we are going to talk about the different types of ecosystems that we will see. But first I want to go through some of the vocabulary that we're going to see when we're talking about ecosystems. So ecosystems are, or an ecosystem is all the living and non-living things in an area. Okay, so we can see this map showing the world, and it's showing different types of ecosystems that we have. And those are based on the type of temperature and climate that is in that area. So in ecosystems, we have abiotic factors, and those are the non-living parts. Like we see here, the water, the light, air, soil, temperature, minerals. So those are non-living. So remember that abiotic means non-living. So biotic would mean the living parts of that ecosystem. So we can see some examples here. The animals that are there, the bacteria, the plants, the things that are living in that ecosystem. All right. Population, that is all the organisms of the same species living in an area. So, for example, all of this type of fish, these penguins, all of the organisms of that same species. So that would be the population. Community is all the populations of the plants and the animals living in that area, just like the community that you live in. That's everybody, different families, different animals that all make up that area. Another word we're going to see is habitat. That is the place where an organism lives. So we've heard the word habitat a lot. So where that organism lives is its habitat. And then niche is the role of the organism in its community. Like, what is its job? What is its role there? What purpose does it serve? And everybody has different jobs. You know, sometimes your job is that you feed others. Okay, certain plants are eaten by certain animals. So maybe you have a plant that a ladybug eats. Well, then another organism may eat the ladybug, and then something may eat that organism, and on and on. They're all important so that that community can continue to grow and survive. So now we're going to move on to biomes and ecosystems. So first we'll answer the question, what is a biome? So a biome is a group of land ecosystems with similar climates and organisms. So we're going to see lots of different types, but when we're looking at these types, we know that they're going to have similar, not exactly the same, but similar climates and organisms. So there are 6 major land biomes and 2 major water ecosystems. When you go through your packets, you have notes, really good notes on these. So I want you to have these notes, and you can add to these notes as we are talking about each biome and ecosystem. Okay, so sometimes people don't refer to ecosystem as biomes. They might just say there are different land ecosystems, and so you may see that word changed, kind of used interchangeably. All right, so for land we have rainforests, deserts, grasslands, deciduous forests, lots of different kinds of forests. Actually, we're going to break those down, and the tundra. And for water, we have fresh and marine. So those salt water. Okay. Now, an area's biome is determined by its climate mostly. So that means what is the temperature? And remember, we've talked about climate when we started talking about weather. Climate is what the weather is for a long period of time. So this doesn't mean like here in North Carolina, yesterday it's 70 degrees, tomorrow it's going to be 40 degrees. This means what is it normally, or what is it, most of the time? How could you describe it? And by the amount of precipitation that it gets. Do you get a lot of rain? Do you get a moderate amount of rain? Or do you hardly get any rain at all? So we can start by talking about rainforests. So we have two main types of rainforest, temperate and tropical. And you probably remember that word temperate. We've talked about the temperate zone whenever we have discussed weather and climate. And we've talked about the tropical zones that we have on Earth and how much warmer and rainier they are. So if we talk about temperate, we talk about moderate temperatures. Nothing really extremely hot or cold. And we are usually having temperate, that moderate weather. So the northwestern coast is a temperate rainforest. So that's not where we are. It receives more than 300 centimeters of rain a year. And in that we see cedars, redwoods, and Douglas firs. Those are the types of trees that we see. Okay. Tropical rainforests are another type of forest that we see. And these are found in regions that are close to the equator, just like the tropical zone that we have around the world. It's always warm and humid all year long. People try to travel to places like this because they can count on that weather to usually always be warm. But these areas have lots of precipitation, lots of rain usually, and they have a very diverse plant growth. It's pretty hot and humid in that area. If we look at trees in the rainforest, we will see that there are lots of layers there. You can see the canopy, kind of the top, and that's like a leaky roof. And then the understory, the layer beneath that. And then you have your forest floor. So we see lots of different layers, and normally because of this, the soil is kind of poor down here at the bottom because it's it doesn't get down. It's like really, really full of those leaves, kind of like we see here in this picture. It's covered in those different trees and layers, and so it doesn't always get to the bottom. So understory plants grow well in the shade formed by the canopy, but the forest floor is dark and only a few plants can live there. So the plants that do survive are plants that do not need a lot of that sunlight. Okay. All right, let's talk about deserts. Now, a desert is an area that receives very little rain, less than 25 centimeters a year, and some receive none. But it's really funny because deserts can undergo really large shift of temperature change. So I think we often think that deserts are very hot all the time, but they are not. They can be really cold at times. And we're going to see a lot of different temperature change when we're there. So the scorching Namib Desert in Africa cools rapidly after that sun goes down. And this desert in Asia can even experience freezing temperatures. So don't think that just because it's a desert that it is hot. All right, we have lots of different organisms that can live there, but they have to be able to adapt to this changing weather and this extreme lack of water. So we have read about a saguaro cactus. We have this Gila monster that can burrow underground, and many other organisms, okay? Lots of snakes, spiders, lizards, kangaroo rats, cactus, tumbleweed. Okay, now we're going to talk about grasslands. A grassland is an area that is populated mostly by grasses and other non-woody plants. And they receive about 25 to 75 centimeters of rain a year, and fires and droughts are common there. So, a savanna is a type of grassland, and it's located to the equator. It's closer to the equator than prairies. Savannas can receive 120 centimeters of rain per year. And they have grass, shrubs, and small trees that grow in a savanna. So they do have a wet season and a dry season. You would see things like lions, hyenas, zebras, oh my, in the grassland. And a lot of these animals are grazers and herbivores. Okay, so the deciduous forest, and those are kinds of leaves, deciduous leaves. Excuse me. They shed their leaves and they grow new ones each year. So examples of these are oak trees and maple trees. They receive rain that supports the growth of those trees. And usually they grow for about 5 to 6 months. Okay, now this tree, known as the taiga, and sometimes you hear it coniferous forest. So those that are conifers are like evergreen trees. So I always think of that like Christmas tree, oh Christmas tree. So here in taiga or coniferous forest, you see evergreen trees, pine trees, fir trees, and it's usually has very cold winters, a lot of snow. Moderate rainfall is seen there. All right, tundra. The tundra is extremely cold and dry. Okay, so it has permanently frozen ground, which is called permafrost. So you're going to see animals like polar bears, wolves, Arctic hares. Does not have a lot of precipitation, so you're only going to see a very short season of growth, and that's going to be those small little plants like moss that's going to grow there. Because rainwater cannot soak into permafrost, there are a lot of shallow ponds because it's that frozen ground. So again, here are some animals you're going to see here in the tundra, those Arctic animals. Okay, and we also have freshwater ecosystems. So that is like streams, rivers, ponds, lakes. They have fresh water, so they're not salt water. So rivers and streams, animals will adapt to that river's current. And there are few plants or algae that can grow because of currents that are happening. You know, that water constantly moving. And a lot of the animals rely on seeds and leaves to fall in the water as food. So they need that to come into that water. So you might see some organisms like this in a river or a stream. Okay, ponds and lakes. So ponds and lakes are standing or still freshwater, so they're not moving like rivers and streams. Lakes are larger and deeper than ponds. So ponds are shallower, and usually in ponds, the water is about the same temperature throughout, Not always, but because it's usually shallow, it's about the same temperature all over. And because it's so shallow, there are plants that you're going to see growing there, like cattails along the river. You're going to see a lot of algae, and it's going to grow in and on top, and that's a producer in that ecosystem. So you're going to see a lot of animals like fish, turtles, ducks, beavers. All right, so marine ecosystems are those saltwater, like estuaries, intertidal zones, the ocean. So an estuary might be a new word for you. That's where freshwater in a river meets the saltwater of the ocean. So this is where fresh and saltwater meet. And an estuary best removes those pollutants. The intertidal zone is the area between the highest high tide line and the lowest low tide line. So if you've ever seen tides changing, the organisms have to be able to survive those pounding waves and the constant water level change and temperature change there, because when the tides are going in and out, the water level is changing constantly. So that's going to be like you may have seen on a pier before, barnacles, starfish, snails, clams, animals like that that can kind of keep themselves anchored, and they can handle those changes. Okay, and then just a plain old open ocean. So we see the surface zone, like the first 100 meters, where you see a lot more light, and then the deep zone below it. And you're going to see really strange organisms, and the farther you go down, the darker it's going to be, and the colder it's going to be. That's because there is not a lot of sunlight going down there. And the animals are going to look really crazy because they're adapting to this very, very dark environment that they're in. So that is an overview of some of our ecosystems, our land and water ecosystems that we will learn about over the next several weeks.